Ex-boss mocked my kid voice and fired me. One glossary and receipts flipped the room, and forced vendor policy with co-signed break grids. Like, subscribe and smash that bell. More wild revenge stories are coming. When a petty boss fired me for a voice he called childish, I expected the story to end in a parking lot, not circle back with a badge of authority. I was a 19-year-old kid paying rent in a basement contact center where fluorescence hummed like headaches and the carpet exhaled old coffee. Ernie, freshly promoted and starving for deference, felt taller when he shrank people. He hovered over my headset, smirked at my tone, and told me I sounded 12. No coaching, no metric, just ego with a clipboard. I carried a cardboard box and a quiet vow. I would build real craft until results spoke louder than his mockery. The next shop treated us like adults, trained us hard, and measured what mattered. My name began to land on the right emails. Then Paul, a senior who managed vendors, slid a folder across a table and asked me to cover a launch while he took leave. "You'll be my eyes and ears for a fortnight," he said. "What you say goes." Under on-site manager sat a name that dragged the old basement smell through the door. Ernie. I pressed a yellow tab onto the folder, client REP, and felt the promise from that parking lot step forward. On the bus that night, I recorded practice calls into a thrift store handset and flipped through annotated scripts bound in rubber bands, reminding myself that paper outlasts swagger. I could still feel the way the exit door had breathed warm alley air the day he fired me. A thin hiss like a tire losing pressure, and I promised not to waste that memory on spite. Skill first, receipts second, ego nowhere. That was the order I wrote at the top of my notebook before I slept. Would that be enough to quiet the ghosts? XYZ had not changed. The air still tasted like stale coffee and older rules. Chairs still listed like tired boats, and forced cheer still clung to the walls. Paul shook Ernie's hand, then pointed at me. For the next 2 weeks, they speak for me. Ernie's smile thinned. Recognition bleached his cheeks. I answered with a professional nod and asked for a floor tour. No gloating, no raised voice. On a side table, I lined up 3 artifacts. An email printout authorizing my sign-off, a badge access form with my name typed cleanly, and a daily report template bearing Paul's signature. Visibility is power when you use it to serve, not to strut. We walked the rows. I asked agents what made calls spiral, which macros were broken, and why breaks ran short. I photographed a warped break schedule, circled a dusty scripts binder missing tabs, and bagged 2 abandoned headsets for the repair log. When we reached the glass room, I set the artifacts in a neat row and scheduled a kickoff at 9 the next morning. In the break room, a vending machine rattled behind a cloudy panel, and a corkboard sagged under memos curling at the corners. I asked for a copy of the attendance policy and found 2 conflicting versions posted months apart. I photographed both and labeled them A and B. Agents mentioned a mystery metric used to shame under the sign of coaching, so I requested the report definition and added a sticky where it failed the contract. A supervisor whispered that people cut breaks because coverage was thin. I drew a grid that smoothed lunch overlaps and tagged it for a trial. By the time rain slowed, a tidy stack of receipts sat on the table. The sign-off email, the badge form, the daily template, twin policy copies, a draft grid, and those broken headsets sealed in a bag. Artifacts do not change a mood alone, but pull enough in sequence and the room shifts. Would Ernie keep nodding, or reach for the old levers? Day 1, I chose daylight over drama. At 9 sharp, I gathered the team beneath a whiteboard titled Today's Wins and wrote 3 names with exact reasons. A calm save, a clean escalation, a textbook empathy close. Praise without receipts is flattery, so I pinned QA score sheets with circles around specific lines, taped screen prints of exemplary summaries with timestamps, and added a photo of a tidy desk with the script neatly tabbed. Then I turned the dial on breaks. "Full breaks honored," I said, loud enough for Ernie to hear. Because rested brains make fewer refunds. I posted a revised break matrix and handed Ernie a copy to co-sign in front of staff. In the afternoon, I logged call sampling IDs for calibration and wrote a summary email that CC'd Paul with 3 bullet points and attached proof. I ended the day with a hallway debrief. What we fixed, what we would fix tomorrow, what we would measure. Ernie hovered, quiet, eyes flicking from my notes to the team. The old tyrant needed noise. I gave him silence with paper. During huddles, I kept praise specific and public, then delivered hard notes in private so dignity did not bleed on the floor. I borrowed a corner of a board for a tiny clinic called Better Phrases, where we replaced brittle apologies with ownership lines that end arguments. You are right to expect better. Here is what I will do now. When a system outage stuttered the dialer mid-morning, I mapped a manual cue on the board while a tech rebooted. The team snapped into rhythm without panic. At day's end, I added 3 more artifacts to the folder. A photo of the revised break matrix by the time clock, a snippet from call tracking showing fewer requeues, and a coach's note that read, "I felt trusted today. Momentum is loud." If he planned to claw back control, had he brought anything stronger than a glare? By midweek, I tightened the loop around facts. We opened with a 5-minute huddle under a header called NON negotiables. Accurate wrap codes, no off-script promises, full breaks, supervisors available on the half hour. I handed Ernie a laminated checklist and clipped another to the silver board. At midday, we ran live calibration in the training room, 2 anonymized calls, a printed rubric card at every chair, and calibration forms that required initials next to each criterion. Staff leaned in. Ernie hunched over numbers he used to wave like a cudgel. After lunch, I asked him to walk me through the daily performance log line by line. I did not accuse. I let silence work. He stumbled, restarted, checked a figure he once would have barked. Doubt began to do what shouting never could. I logged 3 follow-ups. A macro fix request, a staffing note to smooth lunch coverage, and a ticket to replace 8 cracked chairs. At close, I posted a 1-page plan for tomorrow with times, owners, and proof points. I asked him to explain his old pet metric in the calibration. With the rubric in front of him, the holes showed themselves. We replaced it with a cleaner pair. Resolution on first contact and promise accuracy, both defined in the contract and both traceable. After shift, I walked the floor with facilities and tagged 8 chairs with split arm pads, logged tickets, and taped a comm note on the break fridge. Full breaks honored per client directive. In my nightly email, I attached side-by-side charts, their report versus ours, and highlighted where definitions diverged. Not once did I mention the old firing. Revenge by rumor makes you small. I wanted the lesson to land where he could keep it. A process that respects workers ends up respecting managers too. Still, I could feel him reaching for a lever outside proof. Would the last day bring noise or work? As the final afternoon settled, I booked the glass room and laid the week out like a clean receipt. The quality curve rising, adherence restored, refunds down, morale up. Reflections in the glass made everyone more honest. They kept reminding us we were visible to ourselves. I slid 3 artifacts across the table. A compliance excerpt that contradicted a shortcut Ernie tried on day 1, a page titled Action Items completed with signatures and dates, and the calibration rubric with his initials. He swallowed. "How did I do?" he asked, voice missing its bluster. I held his eyes, then placed 1 more page in the row. My first day kickoff agenda with the line that set the tone. Full breaks honored. "You did as well as the process let you," I said. He searched for a softer verdict. I gave him the 1 sentence he once used to end my paycheck, returned without heat. "What do I know? I only sound like a 12-year-old on the phone." He blinked, then looked down at the signatures that would travel upstream without me. I did not spike the ball. Instead, I wrote 3 next steps any decent lead could run without me. Keep the break grid, keep the rubric, keep the daily summary with attachments. Then I added a small habit. A weekly 5-minute clinic at the board, better phrases, run by whoever aced calibration that day. The petty quip I returned was not the point. The receipt trail was. Outside the door, the floor buzzed at a calm, human pitch. Chairs rolled, headsets whirred. Someone laughed low at a customer who finally said thank you. I slid the folder into my bag and left tomorrow's plan under a magnet. The rain had cleared to a pale stripe of sky. Would he carry that plan or crumple it on the walk to his car? The shoe finally dropped at the shared printer. Not with thunder, but with a hiss and the warm ozone of fresh toner. A junior supervisor, cheeks pink with nerves, handed me a stray page that had slid into her packet. On top sat an email Ernie had drafted to Paul's boss. A tidy paragraph, a red chart implying that average handle time had spiked under my interference, and a line about unapproved break inflation. The header showed yesterday's timestamp and a subject line that read performance concerns, as if etiquette could bleach the spin. The axis labels were quietly wrong. Last quarter's baseline masqueraded as this week's. Under the chart rested a screenshot of the report definition missing the clause that excludes outage windows, which explained the fake spike. A third photo framed our revised break grid to look like chaos instead of coverage, cropped so the co-signature was barely a sliver. I walked to the glass room and laid the 3 artifacts side by side, then pulled 2 more from my folder. The dialer outage ticket with timestamps, a memo from tech noting the manual queue, and a side-by-side calibration sheet showing why paste calls run longer while refunds fall. I added a sticky on the deck that read reconcile definitions first and photographed the whole spread in case versions began to move. Rage is loud. Paper is stronger, and metadata has a longer memory than gossip. I wrote a one-page explainer titled What Changed and Why, footnoted every source, and attached the packet to a morning governance invite for vendor ops and Paul's boss. In the invite, I added a single line: "We will reconcile definitions before we argue feelings." I sent Ernie the same deck and offered him a chair at the table, plus an off-ramp drafted on a yellow card. Withdraw the alarm, adopt the glossary and the grid, co-run a short clinic for 1 month, and we move forward as adults. The printer cooled. The room did not. The whiteboard light buzzed like a tired wasp. Would he take the off-ramp or double down and meet the packet head-on? Before dawn, I turned preparation into rails the meeting could not jump. First, I printed a clean time-boxed view: outage start and end, manual queue interval, recovery slope, refund trend line, each line sourced to a ticket or a log, each line carrying a page footer that matched the calendar. Next came a plain English glossary mapping every metric to its clause in the contract so the room would argue reality, not vocabulary. I left a witness line at the bottom for initials and a date box in blue ink. I added a page titled Break Integrity that charted adherence before and after the grid, with Ernie's co-signature from day one in the margin and a note that said honored breaks reduce rework. Then I clipped in the vendor handbook excerpt that bans shadow metrics not disclosed to the client, a calendar of huddles with outcomes, and the calibration rubric with every box initialed and every comment legible. On the last page, I taped a printed chat from facilities confirming 8 chair replacements, because morale sits partly on whether a chair will bite your elbow. Below it, I stapled a small photo of the tag chairs waiting by the service door. For myself, I wrote 3 rules on a sticky. Praise first, cite definitions, ask for a fix that survives you. I tucked it under the top clip where my thumb would feel it. I drafted the off-ramp in 2 plain sentences and slid a spare copy into a manila jacket labeled offer with a felt tip pen on top, so no one had to hunt for ink. When rooms fill, feelings sprint. Receipts walk, and walking wins in the long run. I wanted paper to arrive before pride. In the hallway, the building sighed through vents and the carpet smelled like wet wool. I set the packet in the center of the table, checked the recorder's red light twice, aligned the pens parallel to the folder's spine, and opened the blinds to let the glass reflect us back. The door latch clicked. Chairs whispered on the floor. The room settled into the shape of work. Execution happened under fluorescent truth. Paul's boss dialed in, vendor operations lined alongside, and Ernie sat 2 chairs down, jaw tight, a notebook open to a blank page. I opened by thanking the agents for the week's lift and pointed at the refund line bending down like a wire relaxing. I placed a printout beside the speaker so the graph lived in the room, not in my mouth. I set a palm on the glossary and asked the table to adopt it for this hour. Heads nodded. I walked the outage window, the manual queue, the recovery slope, the cause and effect between paced empathy and cleaner outcomes, and the way contract math treats exception time. Then I placed Ernie's red chart beside the glossary and let the Axis mislabel speak for itself. No scold, just alignment. Vendor ops frowned, then leaned in. "Let us reset to contract metrics," the director said, tapping the glossary. The speaker crackled, and relief moved like air. I slid the break grid forward with his co-signature visible and let the adherence before and after line do the talking. The junior who found the printout nodded when her name appeared in the credits. For last, I offered the off-ramp. Withdraw the alarm, keep the rubric and the grid, co-run a 5-minute clinic for 1 month, and we all move on as grown-ups, lesson documented. Silence held for a beat. Ernie exhaled through his nose, then nodded once, a small hinge unlocking. "Withdrawn," he said. Paul's boss asked him to initial the glossary and the action page. Vendor ops countersigned in block letters. I photographed the signatures beside the packet's cover, captured the phone display with the meeting code for the record, and slid everything into a folder labeled Definitions Locked. Outside the glass, the floor hummed at a human pitch again. Inside, the air cooled and the table felt heavier in a good way. Agreement is not forgiveness. It is a system that can outlive 2 egos. Would the change hold once the glow of the meeting faded down the hall? Or would habit try to sneak back in? Consequences arrived as boring upgrades, the best kind. Vendor ops issued a memo titled Definitions and Discipline that killed the mystery metric, adopted the rubric, and mandated cosine break grids on every launch, with a simple audit note that read tape a photo by the clock. A laminated glossary went up in each team room next to the outage playbook. Supervisors received a pocket card with 3 sentences to use when numbers wobble. Check the definition, check the window, check the human load, then pick a fix you can prove. Ernie spent 4 Fridays co-running the 5-minute clinic at the board, opening with full breaks honored like it had always been his, then walking a tidy call anatomy that left no room for shame theater. The fourth week he added a live practice that showed how a slower open prevents second calls. The junior once mocked for babbling apologies led the third clinic and taught an ownership line that closes arguments in seconds. A small crowd clapped without looking over shoulders first. A month later refunds were down, escalations cleaner, adherence steadier because people no longer hid to steal rest, and the broken chairs were gone from the floor. I sent Paul a one-pager titled What to Keep and attached 3 artifacts: the signed glossary, a redacted calibration set with near-perfect alignment, and a small staff poll that read, "I feel trusted at work more days than not." He replied with a line that said, "Run that play elsewhere." I archived the packet as launch playbook, added a divider called governance, and dropped a thank you note on Ernie's desk that said, "Simply keep the rails. They make you taller. Systems drift unless you nail them to a wall." I pinned the memo to the inside of my notebook and closed the ring with a quiet snap. I left with a folder of small proofs and a habit I plan to keep: praise with receipts, critique with definitions, and always leave behind a rule that can sing when struck. Revenge looked nothing like thunder. It looked like a room where better process made the worst instincts boring, where a chart cannot lie if the glossary is taped to it and the grid is signed in ink. I kept a photocopy of the signed glossary in my notebook, a photo of the break grid by the time clock, the governance action page with initials, and the first day today's wins board with 3 names underlined in blue. Those pages remind me that people rise when the rails are clear and fair. When anyone calls a young voice childish now, I do not sharpen a line. I hand them a rubric and ask them to point at a clause. Then I ask for a call where that clause breathes. If they cannot, we fix the clause. If they can, we fix the habit. Either way, we fix the work and write down what changed so it survives the next shift. That loop has changed more rooms for me than 1,000 speeches and more careers than any scolding ever could. It also robbed my anger of its appetite and gave craft back its seat at the table. If you are ever handed the reins over someone who once humiliated you, anchor the day to nouns you can verify: definition, grid, rubric, log. The rest is weather and will pass if you keep your hand on the page. What would you do if an ex-boss tried to spin a false alarm under your watch? Coach them onto better rails, rotate them out, or escalate with a packet and signatures tailored to your shop? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story.